Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your Friday night edition of the Gersnet Podcast. We are coming to you, as always, live on YouTube tonight. Just a reminder that the podcast will be available on your usual podcast providers, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the likes. So give it a listen and spread the word. We would appreciate it if you spread the word to your friends and family about our podcast, as it does help. Um, so, as always, we are proud to be brought to you by Forrest Precision Engineering. They are a top engineering firm who have been associated with Rangers for a number of years, and we are delighted to have them back in our podcast as always. So, for more information on their services, please visit their website www.forestprecisioneng.com. And also a reminder, as we always do, that they have a stunning executive lounge in Ibrox in the historic main stand. For information about how to book that stunning and unique space, please contact hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Now, on to tonight. Tonight, we're going to obviously take a quick look back on the European game from last night, as well as previewing the big game coming up on Sunday away to Hibs. And joining me tonight, just bringing in my guest, joining me tonight is a man, I'm not sure if he's here to talk about the upcoming T20 World Cup or Rangers last night. I'm not sure which would be more fun, but here we go. So, Stuart, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm not quite sure either what I should be talking about. Maybe one will certainly be more interesting than the other, put it that way.
Yep, that's fair. That's fair. So we're not. I don't think there's a whole lot of points to touching largely on the game last night in terms of obviously we knew it didn't mean a whole lot. And for me, it was almost about getting a run out for some and then getting other ones, making sure there's no injuries and stuff. But we'll briefly talk about the game. So 6 minutes in, young Finley Curtis getting good minutes at that level, produces the goods in terms of a good cross in and not something I expected to see, but Gassama heading the ball into the net.
Yeah, it was almost as if he arrived there by accident and thought to himself, what have I seen other people doing here? And headed the ball down into the ground, completely wrong footing a goalkeeper and the defender, and scoring what you'd have to say was an unexpected goal.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I did say we would briefly chat on the game. I would love to be able to say that was it and it ended that way. However, I suppose a horror show defensively for the rest of that half. Some quite comical defending if it wasn't us. Um, how could you describe it?
If you're old enough, you would describe it as Keystone Cops. It literally was an accident waiting to happen almost. No, you can write the game off and say it was a dead rubber, didn't matter at all, and you get that game out of the way and move on. Or you go by the sort of newfound take on all things football is that you always learn from a game. And what I learned last night was that some of the defending was so atrocious that if you never saw it, some of those players ever again in a blue shirt, it wouldn't be a surprise. If you actually look at the goals that were scored, the first goal, you have Tavernier lying deep, but he's literally playing almost five players on side. Porto decided they were just going to overload the box and get somebody on the end of a half chance, and so it proved. The way it came about for them was rather fortuitous. Somebody gets a touch on the ball when they should be maybe hitting it in another direction, difficult, but plays it onto a Porto player who then scores. The second goal, the look of surprise on Butland and Tavernier's faces when they suddenly realised that when they sort of roll back from the crumpled heap, there is no ball in between them. The ball has somehow managed to squeeze past them and somebody's stuck it in the net. And it's almost like a Tom and Jerry-esque. with a kind of the look of shock, horror that there's no ball there. And I know for all again the praise that Hibernian gets for contributions, he always has that in his game. It has never mattered in 10 years. He always has that capability. And the third goal, Rangers were just manhandled and bullied. You've got Diamandi coming off the post to follow the centre half. If he stayed on the post, he might actually have stopped that. But he gets dragged into having a bit of into no man's land. And Rangers are so desperate to defend the ball. Ultimately, they give a goal away. But you had one guy, a centre half, on the goal line, causing absolute mayhem. And again, if you analyse that goal, when the final touch is administered, there's actually 5 Rangers players directly behind where the ball goes. I mean, it was, you pick that moment in time, you don't know whether they're doing man for man or zonal or what they're doing. And that for me, that goal was particularly worrying, the third goal, because it was so simple. Those are the kind of goals that other teams would look at and say, oh, look at that. They still don't know how to organise at set pieces to defend either long throws or corners or free kicks. And, and again, if Porto are a decent team, most Portuguese teams playing in European competition are pretty damn decent. But that was a poor goal for Rangers to lose last night.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's very little that I could disagree with in that. I think we go away to a team, and I always sort of believe the table doesn't lie. And at the end of the day, they're a better team than us. They should be beating us. However, you go into a game like that, and you look at all those goals, and they're all so preventable. And to me, a lot. That's not about coaching or whatever. It's just a lack of concentration. It's just it's lack of leadership there too in that back line. And
I agree with you. That you have reached a stage in your career where that doesn't need to be coached.
No,
you should be literally on automatic pilot, and the only time you need to react differently if something is unexpected. Okay, the first goal, the touch that takes it into the danger area isn't expected. But Tavernier is under that ball for an eternity and still doesn't get there first, still doesn't manage to make himself big enough to hold off the striker. And I'll say as well, Butland didn't help the situation. If you're a goalkeeper and you're coming out like that, you're coming out almost feet first to try and either clear the ball or clear out whoever's in the path of the ball. He doesn't either. He literally rolls out and just lies there. Hence the reason why the ball squeezes out and ends up in the net. So no, it wasn't good viewing. I cannot believe that Danny Rowe would just have hopped back on the plane and headed back to Glasgow thinking, well, that was just one of those things. These guys will dissect everything that happened in those goals. And the fact is, you're absolutely right there, Ben. All 3 goals, I would say, were preventable. They could have been avoided. And it was just the most basic, fundamental lapses in concentration. And I have to say, in game management, you know how teams are going to attack you. And, there's only certain ways teams can attack. It doesn't matter at what level football's played. Teams will come at you in a particular manner, and what they do is they try and exploit your weaknesses. And the fact that all 3 of those goals almost were carbon copies showed that somebody actually had worked out how to play against Rangers.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. I think just the two things that we try to take from the game, 2 moments. The Fernandez tackle, I think, is worth a chat on, because I know obviously the defence was just touched upon. There was many mistakes. I thought that was lovely. I missed sort of that in the game. That it's an art form,
Yeah. Well, listen, I grew up with a guy who lived in the same village here as me, and that was Tam Forsyth, who turned tackling into something that could have been part, it could have appeared in the stage with the Bolshoi ballet. It was so beautiful. And again, it's just good to see a defender being able to defend in that manner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do see him growing, I must say. Week on week, there's still a lot of rawness and there's still a lot of mistakes in there. There's no doubt about that. But I think he's sort of improving. And, where 3 months ago we thought he's a disaster getting rid, now I think there's possibility with him.
I think personally, I think he's been built up by the manager. And the manager, I think, pulled him to one side and said, you are my centre back. You're my left-sided centre back. You're guaranteed to be playing, and this is what I want from you. And I think that's what you're getting. There's a bit, it reminds me of Calvin Bassey, when Bassey first started out, and there was that kind of rawness, and is he really up to this job? And suddenly he goes from being a gangly youth into being a real man. And I can see the comparison there. I think sometimes as well, you've also, as a centre back, it's very easy to dismiss the role of your partner. Centre backs, great centre backs, have always played in combinations. I don't care if you're Maldini and Baresi or who you might be. Centre backs have always been worked best in tandem, as a pair.
Ferdinand and Vidic, yeah.
Well, Ferdinand and Vidic, even if you want to look at it in Rangers context, you look, I mentioned Tom Forsyth there, alongside Colin Jackson. You look at, Terry Butcher alongside Gough, or Gough alongside Brown. There was an understanding and a reading of what each of them did. And I think actually, as it stands just now, there is one centre-back who's a permanent, and there seems to be a cast of thousands playing alongside him, and that's very, very difficult to get any sort of form any kind of partnership or play in tandem. Defenders know, who goes forward, who's the guy that goes for the ball, who's the guy that stands off, set pieces, who's the guy that does the zonal marking, who's the guy that's heads like a magnet to get the ball away. And I think if you're playing almost on your lonesome, it's difficult to still look effective in that sort of role. But it's also very, very difficult when it looks as if you're doing everything and sometimes you're ending up carrying the can.
Yeah. So the next one I wanted to talk about briefly is Finlay Curtis, but I'll tie that into the sort of the next question along. So I wanted to look at Europe as a whole. Now, it's obviously been very poor. It's very rare for us now these days, and I'm glad that it is this way in some ways, because usually it's the domestic season over by now, and we're hanging on to a small chance of Europe. But obviously Europe's done now. We can move on from it. But would you be able to take any positives from it? So with Finlay Curtis maybe getting minutes, and he scored, not last night, but he scored in the qualifiers, didn't he? And then with experience, will this stand us in good stead for next season, some of these players?
The irony is that before Danny Roll came in, the game was up. Ironically, the best 45 minutes that Rangers produced in Europe came under Russell Martin.
Yeah.
And that is just a bizarre situation. I suppose if you play enough minutes in European competition, you might get it right at some point. And again, those that first half at Ibrox, scoring 3 goals, that was almost like rub the hands in anticipation. Finally, they've got it right, only to be proved in the next 45 minutes and thereafter for several games that they actually had it horribly wrong. So I think Europe, all in all, will go down and be deemed as a failure, a compounded failure, because one bad performance has led into another bad performance or poor result. And I think last night was just a culmination of all these things. Some of us are still old enough to remember when there wasn't such a thing as group stages. And if you got it wrong in your first game out, I remember 80k Athens with Bolly and Loudon in the team, and Rangers being humbled 3-0 in aggregate in that particular game. And the Rangers management and the Rangers owner at that time, Sir David Murray, not being very happy at the outcome. But if it happened then in the first round, that was you out of Europe in August. Whereas now, because of the format, it's prolonged, but that means the agony is actually prolonged as well. And I think for Rangers fans, it's been a disappointment for them not to be contesting games into the new year that are actually meaningful, rather than just running around making up the numbers.
Yeah. Okay. No, fair enough. So moving on from last night and from Europe, transfers. So I wanted to talk about now how between now and the window closing on Monday, how many do you want to see us bring in?
14.
Or how many do you expect?
Well, there's a difference between how many you expect, and also the thing is just now there are evidently players that Rangers want off the books.
Yeah.
Because one, they just haven't performed, or more importantly, they're costing big money to keep them there, and the club can't really afford that. If that frees up wages and monies elsewhere, then there might be some movement. But I still, even this late in the day, you're still looking at it that Rangers have got to get people out the door before they can make any real progress in bringing people in. Yeah, they've made some signings, and you're kind of anticipating that they might actually add to the team and the squad overall in terms of their contributions, and also it bulks up the numbers of the squad, because sometimes it's been a bit threadbare. But I still think that a lot of the transfer activity is going to be in and around balancing the books. Gone are the days where you could rob Peter to pay Paul, because you also had somebody else that you could mug him at the same time and come up with a few more quid. Those days have gone. I think the amount of money as well, cash that went out the door at Ibrox last summer for players who have just not cut it, I think that is now fundamentally damaging or harming whatever Danny Rowe might do. And I think it's interesting as well, Rangers supposedly had a sporting director and they had people scouting and doing all sorts. I think it's interesting, and it would be actually interesting hearing from him how much influence Danny Rowe's actually had in this part of the transfer window. I think he knows the guys that he wants in, and the guys that he wants that will perform for Rangers and perform for him. The guys who are dependable. They might not be your, 8s and 9s out of 10s. The guys who are 7 out of 10 guaranteed, bang on the money, game in, game out. And between now and the end of the season, in terms of the especially the league challenge, I think that's what Rangers are going to need. They're not going to need that spectacular football. I don't think I think they might want to play that, but ultimately they're looking at results. But to guarantee some of those results, they're going to have guys who are really going to have to do the groundwork, the spade work, and that means grafting. And I think it'll be interesting to see, if you like, how many battlers and grafters that Rangers bring in. It's nothing new. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's a bit like Rangers, when Maurice Johnson walked out one door, Stewart McCall came in the other, because that's what it took in that Rangers team. There was nothing, nothing said when James Souness went out and brought in Terry Hurlock. There was nothing said when Walter Smith went out and brought some players in from different places, because they needed somebody in the middle of the park that was going to really take the fight to other people. Rangers have that currently. I have to say they have that in terms of Raskin and Diamandi, but they don't have any backup for that. And if those guys are out, then you're basically looking around the bench to see who you can put in a certain position that would fill that that particular role. There might be somebody there who steps up and between down the end of the season turns in a couple of man of the match performances. I'm always reminded of some of the midfield players that different managers have used. Who would have thought that Bob Malcolm would be the mainstay of the Rangers team when Alec McLeish was there? Who would have thought that Craig Moore or Stephen Presley would be playing in the midfield for Rangers when Walter Smith was there? So let's not get too worried or find ourselves in a position where you're not sleeping at night because you're wondering what might happen. Let's look at what is currently happening. And the fact of the matter is that without being startlingly good, Rangers are actually picking up points aplenty.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And it's an interesting point you make about sort of who and the type of player. Because when you look back to I can't go back just as far as yourself, but when you look at like Walter, and you look at McLeish, you talk about players like Broadfoot, Whitaker. They're not the best footballers in the world, but they're going to go in and he knows what he's going to get from them, and those are the type of ones that get you over a line and win you a title, and that's what we're trying to do right now. Even if you brought in one or two like that will just make sure that we get over the line and win the title, even if it was only, in the summer they moved on, or a year later they moved on. If it's just for now, then in the summer, Danny Rule can do his pre-season and get the team playing whatever way he wants. But right now, it's about getting over the line. And we've seen this with other managers. Clement came in and that first season, it was about getting over the line, and he didn't manage it. So it's about now doing the right thing to make sure that we do. And when you think about when he didn't manage it, we were going for like, oh, Fabio Silva, there's a big name coming in. When really, if we'd have just got maybe some experience within that league or know how to win, you never know what might have happened.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the domestically we've looked at players and there's been a snobbery that he only plays for this team or he only plays for that team. Much the same as Kamara only played for Dundee and they only paid 50 grand for him. And look what a star he turned out to be.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think you look at players and say, well, they're only playing in the same league as us. We need to go somewhere else. That's not always the case. Hence the reason why guys, Motherwell have players in their books and have sold players who have made it big elsewhere. Hearts have brought guys in who are really showing their worth. Hence the reason they're still top of the table. So, I all in all, I think Rangers have not got the resources they probably should have. Therefore, they need to box clever. And if you've got a limited budget and you can only make so many signings, you really need to get it right. You only get one chance at it. And the thing is, if you get it wrong, it's going to be 6 months until you can make it right again. And in those 6 months, who knows what might happen domestically in terms of what you might win or what you might not win.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, important times ahead. So just now finishing up on transfers, we'll talk about what is happening. So the two alleged bids of note anyway were for Gassama and Chermiti. So let's take them independently. So Chermiti's one, first of all, the money that was offered, I think it was something around 14 million euros from Fenerbahce allegedly. Would you have snapped their hand off for that one?
If you'd offered 14 million for Chermiti, I think there's a great many people would have picked him up themselves and carried him to Turkey for that kind of money. If he goes for 14 million, I'm as well not talk about football ever again because I just don't see where there's 14 million pounds worth of value there. I'm actually wondering if all this is somebody blowing the dust off a story from a few years ago that somebody actually was scoring goals and lo and behold it never ever happened or never materialised. I do wonder. And the thing is, it's almost like fantasy football. Rangers have signed a guy who has struggled in Scottish domestic football, yet somebody afar is going to offer 14 million and take him to a league that's far more competitive than Scotland. I just don't see it.
No, I struggle to see it myself. And if we did get that offer, I'll carry him there as you've said. So, but no, I don't see that one happening. Now, I do think the Gassama one is real.
Yeah.
Do at the alleged 10 million, which after a loan, would you have taken that?
That's a difficult one because I actually think Gassama has actually performed to a reasonable level, and I think if it wasn't for him having to go over the kind of, how am I going to put it, difficult going in horse racing terms, I mean, playing under Russell Martin and not being quite sure what flank he was going to be playing on or what his role was going to be. I think under Danny Rowley's got a far clearer sort of menu of things he should and shouldn't do. Hence the reason why I actually think he's actually looked a better player, and hence the reason why other people have actually started looking at him as a player again. Now, if you turn your whatever your initial transfer fee was, 2.5 million into 10 million in the space of 6 months in a team that really struggled to perform at times, that's a decent bit of business. Again, I put the question mark or exclamation mark or whatever it might be behind that one. That £10 million would come in really, really handy if you were going to buy or bring in maybe 2, maybe 3 players, depending on what the finances allow. However, it's a big gamble because if you sell to buy, you then again you're back in that core of having to buy the right people and bring in the right people. And I honestly think the difficulty here is, Ben, that if you sold Gassama and exchanged him for somebody else and made it like for like, is like for like actually going to add an edge to Rangers to actually take them further in the league? I'm not quite sure. I think it's going to be difficult to replace him with somebody who actually comes in and does better, literally hitting the ground, not so much running, but it would need to be a Usain Bolt-like performance if they hit the ground and had to contribute. So that makes it difficult. Again, it might be you bring in a couple of gems, or you might just bring in a couple of bricks to make up the numbers again. And I don't think. I think the way Rangers are playing just now, if they sold Gassama and they went elsewhere and performed as others have done, and Rangers didn't get anywhere this season, that would be a very difficult act to live with going into next season. That would be, you had better get your excuse notes ready just now, because I think a lot of fans would see that as being unforgivable.
Yeah, for what it's worth, no, I wouldn't be selling him now. I don't think he's a finished article, and I think you're selling the potential there. I think there's so much what he could be for us. So no, I wouldn't even be considering it.
The other thing I would say very quickly there, Ben, is you look at what he's done since Roll came in, and that's been a very small window. If he continues that over the next 6 months, and then continues that again into next season for 6 months, you could end up with a player that 10 million. That's only the down payment on what he might be worth. Mm-hmm. Who knows where that might take him. And again, this is an interesting one in the whole balance about what's happening on high with Rangers and how the signings are being made. If it's Roll that's deciding who goes and who stays, I think he'd be wanting to keep Gassama, because I think he knows the danger of selling and not being able to replace with a better article. And that would then come back and reflect on him, because he had a say in it. Whereas previously it was just a clown show of who was coming in and who was going. And the fans up to a point didn't like it, and then knew they had to live with it, because it just became a comedy. I think we've gone from comedy into serious drama now, And if it's serious drama, you want a conclusion where the good guys win.
Yeah, absolutely. So just last thing on transfers very quickly. If we don't do any bit more business, as in no more ins, no more outs, do we win the league?
I would say no. And that's a straightforward answer. I don't think if there's no more business done, I still think there's areas there. We don't know what the new players are going to do. The ones that have come in, we haven't really seen them. They've not been unwrapped and unleashed. But there's still areas, I think, in terms of the midfield, the backup for the midfield are all guys that have actually had a chance to play in there previously and just haven't done it. And that's putting a hell of a lot of reliance on somebody saying, yeah, you're right, for the first 6 months of the season, I didn't really play well, but I'm going to make amends over the next 6 months. And also the whole centre-back situation in terms of the combinations and who you have. You know, the Rangers have been linked with a couple of different centre-backs. If they landed one who became a starter, then my confidence might be a little higher. I still think there's tweaks that have to be done around the team. You know, like who's going to be playing right back? Because the way I see it just now, you've got two guys who have been in there who at best would be a deputy to somebody like Sterling if he played right back. And I think that balance is something that Danny Rowe really has to nail down very, very quickly, probably as quickly as Sunday, to see where Rangers are going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, speaking of Sunday, we'll move on. We'll have a chat about Sunday. And we talked earlier, you particularly talked about players in Scotland that we've been linked with and not gone for. And one of them has just left Hibs today in the shape of Kieran Barry. I certainly wouldn't have paid what was reputed for him, I must admit. But it certainly weakens Hibs not to have him because they thought a lot of him.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the world we live in. That whereas before, players would have seen Rangers as a good option to further their career for bigger money that's been offered abroad, players are willing to give up, you know, their roots and their homes and travel abroad simply because they see better opportunities over there. And who knows, if he makes a go of it, this might not be the first port of call that he goes to. I know he wasn't Scottish, but if you look at somebody like Gattuso, when Gattuso left and went to Salernitana, it was like, well, he's only going to play for them. Not that anybody knew much about Salernitana. What they didn't know was that was only a stepping stone for him to prove back in Serie A what he could actually do. You know, the guy turns into a World Cup winner. I'm not saying any of the Scots guys are ever going to end up as World Cup winners or anybody playing in Scotland currently are, but it shows you what can be done if you're given the opportunity. And the sad thing is that players now see that there are better opportunities abroad or elsewhere or in the English Championship than there is actually in Scotland, especially at Ibrox.
Yeah. So looking forward to the game itself, then what were your confidence levels at? For me, we're very much, as you talked about earlier as well. You know, we just need to get over the line. You know, but particularly in the tougher games, and Hibs away is definitely one of the tougher games. Particularly, you know, this is a game that I've got to be up for. So, where's your confidence levels at?
Well, I mean, Easter Road's never an easy place to go. It's never been an easy place to go. Even all conquering Rangers sides have found it difficult there from time to time. And you know, the thing is that there will be guys at Hibs will be looking at the transfer activity and how other players get a move and thinking, in 6 months or a year's time, that could be me. And the best way of attracting people's attention is to turn in a performance, against Rangers. Yeah. You know, the TV cameras are there. All eyes are on this game. and people could move out to make a name for themselves. The other thing is, I think Hibs collectively, as a team, need some kind of result as well. Yeah. They're looking at they've reached a kind of juncture in the season where things have been going okay for them, but they've slightly gone off track of late, and the performances certainly haven't been there, and some of the results haven't been there either. But they are looking at it. They need a statement performance against Rangers, and again, you saw what they did to Hearts a few weeks ago. They're more than capable of matching it against what you might call the big boys in the league, and I think that's something that Rangers have got to safeguard against. I don't see it being a game of let's take it easy there. I think if you're going to beat Hibs, you're going to have to beat them early on. And I'm not saying hold on, but get ahead and then command the game. If you're going to suddenly turn that into trench warfare and go toe to toe with them, that's when you start losing goals and start losing games.
That's going to remind me of the 3-3 game, I think, last season, or was it season before, I think. So that would have been last season because Hamza scored a hat-trick. But so that's what I think. That's how we start is very important, as you sort of alluded to, because Hibs heads can go down and the crowd can really go for them as well if we start very well. So I think that's very important. So looking at the team itself, what would your starting 11 be?
Well, listen, you have the net effect, so to speak, of having to play a European tie. Now that could work in one of two ways. It could either be that players come back and they've got another game in their legs and they struggle, or it could be that game actually keeps them moving and going in the right direction, and they can kick on. I would hope it would be the latter, because I think again, having talked about Hibs not performing, I think there's one or two Rangers players will have been back in that fight last night and think to themselves, we should have done better there. We should have been more resilient. We should have carried more of a fight. If we can score a goal that early on, then we should possibly have defended better, or even maybe tried and get another goal. So I think maybe one or two owe it to the manager to turn in a performance. But again, what I would say is it depends. The manager's the guy who's working closely with the team, and I don't think, I might be wrong on this, and anybody there wants to correct me, and plenty do. I don't think the manager has basically said, this is my starting 11, I will go with this starting 11. He's always made changes and made tweaks here and there, sometimes unexpectedly. And again, he's got a couple of new toys waiting to be introduced. And I don't see Rangers having spent money in the transfer market without giving these guys a go.
Yeah, I wonder, I could see Scott Olsen coming in from the start. I just wonder about Chukwueze. I don't know if this is a game to sort of hit. I mean, it could be. It could go one or two ways. You can go there. You can put a marker down and
everything can go. Everything big can go one or two ways. But I think if you're going to be introduced, again, it's one of these sort of juggling acts. Do you introduce the guy in an away game against difficult opponents, or do you give him a game at Ibrox for his debut when suddenly he's confronted by 50,000 fans who expect 10 times more than the guys who went to Easter Road? Yeah. I think that's a kind of balancing act. Danny Rowe, for me, has actually been a very good man manager. Yeah, he's managed the players well. I also think he has managed fan expectation very well. Nobody's got an argument. You can have an argument that Rangers are not playing great football, but all he needs to do is point to the W's that run out the side of the league table and how many games Rangers have gone back to back and actually winning matches, and who the opposition have been in those games. And I think he has managed the kind of expectation well by doing it his way, not managing the expectation by giving the fans what they want, but actually saying to the fans, trust me on this one, this is what I think we should be going with, and actually doing the business. I think he learned early on against Hearts that there were certain ways of doing things in Scottish football, and other times you don't go too gung ho. And I don't think he's ever made that mistake again since. I think he knows the strengths of his team. He tries to get his team playing the way he wants and playing to their strengths rather than being dictated to by the opposition. And that part of it is what's seeing Rangers through just now. The fact that Rangers are actually getting the results and doing so by battling and fighting away, turning it into a shit throwing exercise, if you like, but they can throw the shit harder than anybody else. So that's what you get in the results.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So talk to me then about the starting 11 still. I know you've gone around the houses here, but give us. I mean, obviously your goalkeepers is up in Scotland, but
yeah, I mean,
key positions.
Well, I don't see it changing too much from what he maybe set out against Porto with, or what he's done in the last couple of weeks. The thing for me is, getting into this game, is who he trusts up front. I don't think you can go to Easter Road and hope your striker who's struggling to score scores for you. You know, I don't think it works that way. Okay, people go, oh, look what he did against Celtic. Look what he's done since. You know what I mean? I think that's
more of a one-off than
correct. That was the norm is that he struggles. That was not normal what he did against Celtic. So I think you have to look for somebody who's going to make a contribution rather than be in the team because, well, we've played this way for the last couple of weeks. So whether he changes it in the striking department or not, I'm not quite sure. Whether he goes with something different because you've got Olsen coming in and, is he going to suddenly play with like wider players as the attacking guys with a false number 9 or something like that? Again, you don't know because he's got different toys in the box to play with now. And it might be that he springs a bit of a surprise and says, right, for this game, I'll break with convention and we'll try the wide guys as the main attacking options rather than playing somebody through the centre.
Okay, yeah, no, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. So as we begin to wrap up here, just wanted to let everybody know that John will be on Sunday night for the usual time, 9:30. And he will be joined by Brian and Scott to talk about the game after the game, obviously. But before we go, I just want to get a match prediction from yourself, Stewart.
As I always say, I will take 1-0. It sounds predictable, and it always has been predictable. But I think in football, if you win 1-0, you're picking up 3 points. You're not conceding any goals, and your goal difference is improved.
Yep.
Take that as the most basic of basic victories. But that's if that's what it takes to stay in the hunt. To a couple of weeks ago, Rangers were being written off as not being in the hunt, and all of a sudden they're on the coattails of Hearts. Hearts is beginning to now feel the pressure as well. Because they're the front runners and they're there to be shot at. So far, they've done extremely well. I said often enough, come back to me at Christmas or New Year and see where Hearts are. They're still there. They're still doing it their way. And again, the whole thing, the Hearts fans care if they win 5-0 or 1-0. No, they don't. All you're interested in is keeping ahead or keeping in contact with the opposition that those nearest around you. And if it's a 1-0 victory, especially at Easter Road, I have to say, then you would take it all day long.
Oh, absolutely. I just feel how calamitous our defending was the other night. I can't see us keeping a clean sheet, although we have been domestically very good that way. But I have a feeling we win 2-1. That's my prediction for it. So Stuart, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you. Enjoyed it, Ben.
Cheers. And thank you everybody for listening. And just a reminder that the podcast will be available in the coming days on all your usual podcast platforms. So thank you everyone.